Good morning. Thanks for picking this session and joining us here. My name is Kevin Brown. I'm from IBM. I work out of the Public Sector Analytics Solutions Center in Washington, D.C. IBM has a handful of solution centers around the world: London, Zurich, Beijing, New York, and Washington, D.C. Our team is focused on public sector. I am listed first, but I'm going to speak the least, I think, I hope, and I'm going to share the stage today with Carolyn, Hogg, and Jeff McTygue, who are your colleagues from California. And we're going to be talking today about creating value through big data and analytics. So I'm going to set the stage and provide a framework. I don't know if you've had a chance to look through the slides. They are available online, I've been told. And I'll provide a framework for discussion. We'll each present a little bit, and then we'll have a panel discussion, and I hope that it prompts some questions and interaction. The focus of today's session will be a conversation, I hope, and not just a presentation. So IBM has been dealing with public sector customers and working on big data and analytics for a number of years. We're working in 170 countries around the world and at all levels of national, state, and local governments. So we're seeing a pretty broad perspective on the challenges you're facing, and I won't dwell on these. These should look familiar. Maybe the folks in this room are not as worried about national defense, but you're seeing these critical mission and business imperatives, basically the need to do more with less, to improve the efficiency of your services, to potentially raise revenue, and Jeff will talk a lot about that. These are common themes, and what I'll share with you today are 9 case studies. I won't go through the details of them, but they are available online, and some of my IBM colleagues and I will be at our booth across the way. Is it 14? Just outside this room, if you want to go into more detail. We also have some pretty detailed metrics and ROI from those case studies that we can share with you if you drop by. So one of the things that we're seeing that's very common with organizations that are most effective in creating value is a change from what they did in the past, which was just trying to deal with data and understand, measure, and report on what happened in the past. Our customers that are most successful in creating value are shifting their focus forward in time. They're using data, they're using analytics to try and get ahead of the curve, to anticipate and predict the future, and even to shape the future, right? So it's a change from a retrospective to a predictive and even a prescriptive use of the data. We see them organizing their technology components in pursuit of achieving transformative change in these, we call them solution segments. I'm an enterprise architect by training, so I think of these as ends and means. The top row are the ends. You're trying to bend curves and impact measurements and performance in these different areas, and you have some technologies that you can apply. So I'll talk a little bit about these technologies and how they're being applied in these different areas. In social program effectiveness, there's a couple here. The Alameda case study is pretty interesting, and there's a nice return on investment there, a reduction in caseload work of 90%. Right? So the analytics were deployed in a way that improved the efficiency and the effectiveness of the caseworkers and allowed them to have a much more concentrated focus on where humans were actually required. So you can see that in international, in the UK, and in the United States, analytics have been used to transform social programs. And this is a logical architecture of how that was accomplished. So on the left-hand side, you see a number of data sources, and if you're familiar with the big data V's, velocity, variety, and volume, right? The data is coming from the left. It's being fed into a platform, and this is vendor and product neutral, but it's a logical depiction of the kind of platform that we think is necessary to deal with those V's. And then on the right-hand side, a number of applications, if you will, that are being used to create value. And this slide will come back as we go into the other areas, and you'll see that the architecture is the same. The data may be a little different, the sources may be a little different, the applications may be different, but the architecture and the capabilities of that architecture is largely the same across domains. So here's another area, some case studies from threat and crime prediction and prevention. FBI, Memphis, and an interesting study in Europe. Again, we have details of these case studies. I didn't want to go through them in detail here in this session. But the architecture for this domain is actually exactly the same. So across the top, you can see real-time processing. This is high volume data processing. In the middle is the ability to make sense and inference from large volumes, and across the bottom is the fourth V, veracity, data governance, and lifecycle management. Again, the data types on the left are a little different than the list we saw before. The applications on the right are a little different, but the architecture is common. And that's a theme that we see across the customers, IBM's customers that are able to be successful in dealing with big data and creating value. They have a common architecture that allows them to deal with lots of different types of data and to support different types of analyses. In the area of budget, finance, and revenue management, which is Jeff will focus on, same kind of results, same kind of architecture actually. Again, different data, different end user applications, but the same architecture. So I focused really on the technical part here, the technical platform, but in discussions that we've had with our colleagues and in discussions we've had in the Open Data Conference yesterday, there was a lot of realization that it's really not just technology that allows you to succeed and create value. So IBM has been studying big data and the creation of value from big data for a number of years. And these are a number of studies that were produced by the IBM Institute for Business Value, where they went out and surveyed a large number of customers around the world and produced these reports. The most recent one from 2013 came out at the end of October, is actually explicitly on extracting value from data and analytics. And so they studied, they surveyed 900 business and IT executives from around the world, 70 countries, public and private sector. And what we found is that looking at case studies, sometimes it's hard to extract the common patterns. So what they did was they did this really broad survey and then extrapolated into the common patterns. So what we found is there are actually 9, they call them levers. I talked earlier about bending the curve. These are the levers that you use to bend the curve. They're organized in this picture in 3 layers, if you will. It's almost a maturity model with the baseline at the top, the core capabilities that you need to enable your basic handling of the data, and then as you mature, moving into the drive and amplify. We're going to talk about each of these levers in a minute. Another way to look at them is to organize them vertically by strategy, technology, and organization. And you see that only 1/3 of them, the middle 3, are focused on technology. The others are focused on social, culture, and strategy. And it's actually really important that you understand this. I went through the agenda and looked at the abstracts, and most of the topics seem to focus on technology, which is great. Technology is important. But if you really want to be successful in your projects and in creating value from big data and analytics, technology is only part of the puzzle, right? So we're going to talk a little bit more about these different levers, and the conversation during the panel will be focused on organizing the topic around these levers. All right, so I'm going to let Jeff come up now and introduce himself and talk about his experience with FTB. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jeff McTygue. I manage the Business Intelligence section at Franchise Tax Board, and we work with Franchise Tax Board's major BI applications and a lot of the data movement and data analysis. And I'm going to talk today about, and briefly talk today about our experience using the SPSS software to deliver predictive analytic models for our compliance systems. And so just a little bit of background. Franchise Tax Board has some fairly successful compliance programs. We have a collection program that collects $2.6 billion annually. We have our audit program assesses $650 million, and we have a non-filer program that generates $400 million. So we have experience with these compliance activities, and we don't rest on our laurels because we understand there's always room for improvement, and we do have some business problems. And really they come down to the volume and the variety of our compliance cases. So you saw the dollars were big, but so are the inventories. So we have, almost 2.5 million collection cases. Each year we create 900,000 non-filer cases and 250,000 audit cases. And so the question is, not all of these cases are created equal. Some are much more productive than others. Some, to be honest, are not valuable at all. And so how do we arrive at the ones we should be working? There's not enough hours in the day to do all of these inventories. We have issues, again, with some need manual review, some can go right out the door, and how do you identify those? In our audit environment, we may have a tax return that has multiple problems, and which is the one we should focus our resources on. So really, at the end of the day for us, it was coming down to prioritization. And this slide is really like a before and after. So it's not that we didn't try to prioritize before. We used what you might hear in the industry called expert models. And these were not that rigorous. And so they're often based on our staff experience, our observations about what's good and what's not. They're often based on anecdotal evidence, so you feel as a collector or a manager of collectors or auditors that this is what works. But you really haven't done a serious statistical analysis of what does and what doesn't. They're frequently one-dimensional, so what that means is you're looking at just one element. In our non-filer world, we looked at the source of income. So we knew that wage-based cases were pretty productive, but we didn't know within that group which were more productive than others, and many weren't. So the idea of bringing more factors into our decision making. And the other thing that we struggled with is that 10 years ago, we might have made this one, but we haven't updated it. And we realize that our behavior changes the behavior of our compliance cases, and they may be adapting to what we're doing, and we didn't really have that opportunity to evaluate and look in that. So going forward, what we did is we took a more analytical approach. We looked at the outcomes that we wanted to happen. So for our collection cases, payment in full. For our non-filer cases, a tax return filed. For our audit cases, the worst thing that can happen, I think, from both the taxpayer's perspective and ours, is that we do this intrusive process, and at the end of it we say, oops, there's no change. So no one likes that because both sides' times are wasted. So we wanted to avoid those. So we sat down for each of those groups, we looked at the cases that had those outcomes, and then we essentially kind of threw the kitchen sink at it. We took all of our data sources for these cases, and we started to sift through it and look at it, and we found a group of attributes about each of these cases, or that these cases shared. And so certain filing history is a good indication of whether a non-filer is going to file. Payment in the past is a good indicator of whether someone's going to pay in the future. Those are kind of obvious, but when you group them and look at them, that's kind of what we uncovered. So from the data analysis, and we found the attributes that they shared, the next step was, okay, which are the ones that are predictive? So you can have a dozen things that they all have in common, but what's correlation and what's causality? And so we were focusing on, okay, what are the ones that if we know about, we could do something? So the idea is, okay, which are predictive, which are the attributes, and so then we narrow down to those. And the idea is, in our process, we may have fed 500 elements about each non-filer or collection case, and at the end of this process, we had about 10 that we felt were predictive. And that's how essentially the models work and are refined. You start with a lot of data, you go through it, the software kind of identifies what they have in common, and then takes it that next step to what are the ones that are predictive. And then you step back and you build your model based on those 10 or 15 predictive elements. And so that's what we did. And we've, to date, have done 3 separate of these efforts. We modified our existing collection model, and that's been in production for about 18 months. We created new models for our non-filer cases, and that's also been in production about 18 months. And we have just built and are actually compiling as we speak an audit model. And so the goal for each of these was a pretty short turnaround. So we wanted to get them done in 4 to 6 months. We wanted to leverage the data and the hardware and the software that we had, so we plugged them into our existing infrastructure. And I think this third one is the most important. We wanted to deliver some value without totally disrupting these legacy systems. And, you know, like any legacy system, they have constraints on what they can accept and what they can't. So the challenge was, okay, how do you deliver something to this? And the nice thing about this is you're delivering a score. And that's something that's pretty easy to plug in and to understand that, okay, this score means good, this score means bad. I sort my workloads along these lines. And it was fairly non-intrusive to the legacy systems. And I think we've been fortunate to date. I would argue that the good economy is playing into some of this, but we've had some fairly good results. The collection models have generated $400 million over the past 2 years. And on the non-filer side, we've seen a 300% improvement in what we call our good contact rate for deciding which non-filer, business entity non-filer to contact. And I believe I've come to the end of my slides. Yes, if I go the right way. So I will turn it over to Carolyn.
So it's just the down arrow?
Yes.
Okay.
The clip as well.
Okay, good. All right, well, I hope everybody had a good night's sleep because I had a nightmare that all my hair fell out. So I was happy to wake up today. I'm the CIO for the city of Fresno, and we are starting our big data project on, it's a small project, but at the end of the project, we're going to be able to work with our community and other agencies to show the power of big data. And we're going to start out using our traditional code enforcement data. This is what our internal city staff look at. Yeah, there's a lot of numbers there. It doesn't really mean anything to our residents of Fresno. So we are taking that data, and this is another graph. You know, this is typical of what people see graphs. Okay, yawn, bore. That's not going to get our community excited at all about what we're trying to do as a healthy community. So working together with Fresno Unified School District and the City of Fresno, we are taking that same data, the boring data that you saw on the spreadsheets, and we're plotting it. We're kind of following what New York did with their 311 system, but we're taking our code enforcement data, and we're going to focus on weeds in the median island because that's one of our mayor's really big issues. But after 110 reasons from our Public Works Department why we can't focus on median island weeds, working with our community because of OSHA violations, and we decided, okay, well, we're going to go to, I'm going to back up to the next long graph area there, which is rubbish and miscellaneous dumping in alleyways, and plot it on a map of our city. And so what this visually shows, and if you were in the keynote session today, what Pamela was talking about, one of the key issues with big data is visualization. So this is one of the concepts that we're promoting. So we're taking the larger the code violation infractions for illegal dumping in alleyways, and actually seeing where the big areas are in our city, the big bubbles, and then we're going to put another layer map on with schools for Fresno Unified and see, okay, where are the biggest bubbles in our city that are located closest to the schools, and then working with our Fresno Unified journalism students, we're going to use social media, and they're going to blog this whole 1 month Shrink Your Bubble campaign. By blogging it, we're going to bring community awareness, and work it with like faith-based organizations, and so the challenge or the campaign is see who can shrink their bubble the fastest in a 1 month campaign. And so it really is the City of Fresno working with Fresno Unified, but then also the app that we're developing is working with a private company who is a tech company. So it's a public-private partnership that's cross-agency. And so it sounds simple, but it's really a good way to bring awareness to the power of data that we have in the city, and then take the analysis from the blogs and the comments and see if we can then use data science to determine, okay, well, how can we, bring value from this campaign? This is what I was like. What this means to our council members is, I just learned this, the problem with alleyways and rubbish dumping, what people do is they'll load up their pickup truck, tie a rope around it, tie the other end of the rope to a light pole or power pole, drive the truck, and then all the rubbish stays there. So it's like with 5 minutes, we have a huge alleyway full of rubbish. And so typically the city will go in, clean it up, and then next month the truck goes down there, and so we're using this visualization, the bubble map, to maybe show our council members in their districts, okay, here's these large bubbles. Instead of being reactionary to this problem, you may want to decide to do a policy change, because right now the city has a policy ordinance that there's to be no gates in alleyways. So this could, help with their policy decisions and also help, with our community. So that's our Shrink Our Bubble campaign that we're going to hopefully get underway during spring. And it's a way to engage our citizens, engage the faith-based organizations, and engage our students, because the students are going to be blogging this, taking pictures, the photography students, talking to their parents. So that's our small step forward to engage our community in the power of big data, which is going to lead us then to our next project, and this is where it gets bigger for our community, is, by working cross-agency, listening to Pamela talk, she wants, I think one of her goals is, I wrote it down here, healthy communities, and that's exactly what we want to do, is we want to work with the Department of Social Services and the city's data, because we have a huge homeless, issue. That's just one variable, and that is a city issue, but working with Department of Social Services or the health group, we may be able to combine that data to deal with a citywide issue. Another cross-agency project that we want to work on is working together again with Fresno Unified and code enforcement and the housing authority. So our code enforcement people go out, they deal with a code violation, and they see, there's students in the middle of the day on a school day playing out in the front yard, but they also notice that the house is really infested with, vermin or rodents or bugs or whatever. And so by sharing the data that code enforcement gets together with Fresno Unified, with the students in that area, together with the housing authority, the power with that sharing of the big data is housing authority can know that, okay, well, this is maybe a Section 8 house, and so we're going to withhold their funds until that, landlord deals with the issue. And then the school can also know, okay, there is a health issue here, and maybe that's why there's high absenteeism for these students, and then have Fresno Unified work with the Department of Social Services and see, what services are available to this, particular family in this community. So it's a very holistic approach of just, cross-agency sharing of data, and, dealing with that social pathology issues that we all face. So that's...
Very good. I know you have time constraints, so can I ask you a couple questions?
Sure.
This session started. So you touched on it a little bit during your presentation, but I wonder if you can elaborate a little bit
Well, the value to the city specifically is when our mayor has 3 initiatives, and it's job creation and economic development, our downtown revitalization, and then our neighborhood community revitalization. And so, as I was saying, once we get that Shrink the Bubble, the initial Shrink the Bubble campaign out and get a model developed, then we can actually go into our communities and do that sharing of data cross-agency. So the value of that is, meeting one of our mayor's 3 top priority initiatives in the city.
So would you say the value is more internal to your city government or external to the citizens, or some of both?
Both, because of the recession, basically our code enforcement, the staffing levels just shrank. So because of our limited resources, we have to go outside of City Hall walls and work with other agencies so that we can continue to not just support our community, but improve the areas that need it the most.
And what about expertise? Where did you find the data science and the expertise that you mentioned how to use public-private partnerships? Can you elaborate on that?
Sure, that public-private partnership, we have the data, we have traditional programmers, in the city, but we don't have the programming skills that are needed for, the visualization aspect of it. So we actually are working with a group called Bitwise, which is a very interesting group because they actually offer it's called GeekWise Academy. It's I think it's a 6-week course for $200, and it's great because they meet weeknights, 3 nights a week from 6 to 9. But it's so intense, and it's with experts in that field where they actually teach the students how to code using the newer technology to be able to do those mobile apps. And so the beauty of that is the youth today, they don't want to spend 2 years in a community college and then really not have that skill set that they need. So within 6 weeks, their hiring rate is outstanding. These people who sign up for it, out of each class of 10, 3 people get an offer right at the end of the 6 weeks. So that's how we're using it. We're kind of combining the expertise within the city, but not within City Hall.
Questions for Carolyn? Questions from the audience? Carolyn, think about which one of these numbers your question fits into. I dropped that one. But it looks like there's a question in the back.
The route's serious. It's going to roll up. I'm just curious if there's any special planning you're really anticipating what could be very widespread on the plan.
Well, actually, that's a perfect question. We are, because the City of Fresno was chosen as the Strong City, Strong Communities Federal Partnership Program 2 years ago. And so what that meant were there were federal agencies that actually came to Fresno and worked directly with us. And one of those agencies was USDA because of our strong agricultural presence. Fresno County is the #1 ag producing county in the nation for the last 45 years. So that's what we do. And with the drought, that's going to be a huge impact, not only to the world that we feed, but also the workers who work in the farming industry, because if there isn't crops to grow, then there's no crops to pick, which means there's going to be more of food loss, which means we're going to also have to deal with a population that is going to be hungry because there's no work. So that's exactly what we're doing. We're using the data, cross-agency data, with USDA and the city and the food bank, and we are already trying to do predictive analytics to see how we can lessen this crisis that's coming up.
So that's a great example of change from retrospective reporting to doing predictive analytics and trying to shape the future. So, understanding the past is good, but the future is where the value is going to come.
Exactly.
Anything else you want to share with us before you go through questions for Carolyn?
No, I just want to comment. I think it's great that, because I know a lot of the attendees are here from the state level, but it's so important to, as a local government from the city, to work together with the state in these kinds of environments because, just listening to the keynote speaker today from Health and Human Services and their goals of, improving the community, that's exactly what the city is doing, improving our community. So working together, it's a great platform here. Okay.
Thank you very much. I was asking about expertise, and Jeff said it sounds like, or it sounded to me like what Jeff said is they have considerable expertise that they've developed in-house. So my next question was about career paths. Is that actually something that people can do at FTB, is be a data scientist, or is it something that people are sort of doing in addition to their day job?
Well, it's a little of both. We have a group of statisticians who do a lot of, call it traditional revenue forecasting and predictive, and within my organization, we have IT staff who focus on business intelligence applications. So we're treating the SPSS as an additional BI application. Okay. So we have staff that would be trained in working on that.
Okay, so that prompts me to a question about platform, which is one of the technology levers. You mentioned SPSS. How did you decide to use that? What made that the right choice for you? How is that integrated, if it is, into other parts of your data architecture?
The SPSS, the product came as part of a bigger project, and some of the guidelines we gave to the vendor on that project were to leverage existing technologies. So we have DB2, we have Data Stage, so it was kind of a follow-on that SPSS would be a good match for our existing infrastructure.
Okay. And how is that integrated into your data integrity, data governance platform? I assume that there's a lot of high importance placed on the veracity of the data. You need to make sure you understand its provenance and its quality.
Correct, and that's part of our existing BI processes. So we're treating this like another data mart, and the rigor around building a data mart and understanding what goes in there and being able to explain that is all part of that.
Okay. So I asked Carolyn about the source of value. What are you seeing as the source of value from your analytics projects and your use of them?
It comes down to dollars and cents. I mean, we're a revenue generating agency, and we measure ourselves on that. The other things we're looking at is how quickly we turn around a case. So how long does it, can we avoid aging? So it's those type of metrics are what we're using and evaluating ourselves on.
Right. Right. And are you able to share some of the rough orders of measurement, the return on that investment? I know you had some dollars up there, but what about performance, reduction in the time to do an analysis, anything like that? The goal, especially in the non-filer area, is to get those cases out the door. And so what they're seeing is they are able to get to the ones in to get through the inventory in about a third of the time that they were before. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I think that's important to point out is where we've had the most success is where we were the least rigorous before. So we have in the non-filer world, most of our casework are individuals who don't file the return. A lesser one is corporations and business entities. And to be honest, individuals are much simpler than business entities. So we had a fairly good understanding of what makes an individual non-filer tick. And so the lift we saw with the new individual non-filer model was only about 25%. On the business entity side, we were really, I think anecdotal was kind. It might have been kind of the swag. So that's where and as you saw my slide, it was about a 300% improvement on how quickly they could get these cases contacted and out the door. So. Questions from the audience for Jeff?
Yes, sir.
Could you try to drill down? Our agencies have a lot of success in situations where things are changing, handful of models.
That is one of the methodologies that the software uses. So it actually allows you to pick an approach, or it defaults to an approach. And so neural networks were one of the approaches that were used to build the models. And I wish I could explain to you how the software makes that decision, but I can't really get a straight answer for that. So.
Other questions?
Thank you all for your time.